Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato, and it's exciting times, baby. Training camp has arrived. There's been 2 training camp practices. That's exciting, but I'm even more excited about another development that I just learned shortly before the show, and that development is our very own homegrown talent. Homegrown talent in the New York area, the New Jersey area, like Hapakong or whatever you call it.
I'm not from Lake Hopakon, but I love the fact that none of the New York Jets could pronounce Hopakon. It seems like everyone
don't really know which of those towns you're from up there in the West. Which one is it again?
Netcon.
Netcong. I always think it's Hackettstown, but like, no, that's where we go to get wings when I visit you. It's not Lake Hopakon. That's where you go to just like hang out and have fun on the boats and stuff.
Never really went on the boats. I mean, maybe like once in my life, but that's a bougie
You're not a
life
boat
now.
guy on Lake Hopakon?
No, I like it. I just didn't really have access to it.
My friend Jonathan owns a boat and rents it. He bought it to rent it out, and I see him on his Instagram. He's having massive parties out there on Lake Hopakon, like day after day. And I'm seeing these videos of there's a lot. Looks like a lot of fun going on there. A lot of nice looking women out there partying on Lake Hopakon. Looks like a good time, honestly. Like maybe like there's F Cove at the Jersey Shore. Have some fun out there. Maybe Lake Hopakon is the new F Cove. I don't know, but you should get out there. But anyway, he's not from anywhere. Our own homegrown talent, Nick Filato, will be a credentialed member of the Giants media with Big Blue View tomorrow at the Giants practice. We're recording this on Thursday. We're going to drop it on Thursday. So on Friday's practice, Nick will be there. And that's exciting because since we started this podcast, at least, neither Nick or I have been at Giants practices. Now, I've been credentialed in the past, and I could get it again if I want to, but it does not work with my work schedule. I have a full-time job with CBS Sports, and I need to be online all day, especially at times of training camp. That doesn't mean I'm not going to try to get out there at some point this year. We'll talk about that later. But the times that I have been in the past for training camp were all the way back in like the Odell Beckham Jr. days. And then I got to do credentialed. I reported when I was with the NFL team of CBS. I reported on 2 Daniel Jones games as a credentialed member of the media. His first game at home against Washington in 2019 and another game later that year. I think it was versus the Jets. But since then, I haven't been doing anything from a credentialed standpoint and a media standpoint with the Giants since 2020. So it's exciting to get one of us back in there, and I'm excited for Nick to get this experience. I'm excited to see what it's all about. I gave him a little lowdown on what to expect from the beat reporters. Let's just be honest. They don't know us that well, and they're not the warmest people right away. Just giving him the heads up. Everybody's in for their own here. Everybody's out for their own. But no, it doesn't matter. Nick's going to be there watching practice, getting his own observations, and nobody does it better than him. Really, let's be honest about the situation. There's not really anyone who's going to be able to observe this practice, in my mind at least, better than Nick as far as, and I'm willing to say that, honestly. I really do believe that as far as all the people who will be credentialed members at Friday's practice, Nick will be the best as far as observing release off the line of scrimmage. All these intricacies of playing every position, every individual drill, all the team drills. So I'm excited to see what you have to say about it, Nick. And I'm very excited about tomorrow's practice. We're going to recap the first 2 practices today. Neither of us were there, but we've seen the videos and we've read. But tomorrow, I'm very excited to get your inside take, Nick. So I'll leave it. It's a long intro. Gave you a lot of rambling there, but I am excited to hear it tomorrow. So what do you have to say for yourself?
It should be cool. And thanks to Ed Valentine and Big Blue View for applying my credential. And thanks to the New York Giants for accepting it, because it's not necessarily something they just give away.
No, trust
now
me.
I'm back on the East Coast, baby. No more Arizona lifestyle. And I get to go to training camp and check it out. And hopefully we get some good insight tomorrow.
The Giants are very stingy with their credentials. No offense. And I mean, it's just a reality situation. Even CBS Sports, a massive organization. We applied for 2 credentials last year. Me and my old boss, Kevin. We only got 1. And he's like, you can have it. It's like, what? Like, oh, man, I was going to go with you. We were going to have a good time. Like, what's going on here? CBS Sports can only get 1 credential. So I'm happy for you. Big Blue View got 2. And I'm excited to see what you think, again, about practice, but when you're going to get firsthand observations. But today will be the way we've done it in the past. Observations based on the videos we've seen, what we've read, and more importantly, quotes from general managers, players, because these are things that we can lean on, Nick. So I think the best way to start today, as we recap the first 2 practices, is with the offensive line situation. We had a massive scare on the first day of practice with Jermaine Eluemunor going down with an injury. Since we've learned, take a deep breath. God, that would have been brutal, by the way. We cannot afford a Jermaine Eluemunor injury just from a guard and tackle standpoint. We cannot handle this type of stuff. But take a deep sigh, deep relief. He's fine. He just has bruised ribs. He basically said, you guys try getting hit by Dexter Lawrence on a football field and see what that feels like. But where do you want to start with the offensive line situation as well, outside of that injury?
Last week on a podcast, and I think I released a YouTube short about it, Jermaine Eluemunor said something to the degree of, hey, I have a lot of faith in the right tackle, so I'm just going to focus on left guard. And you got to think, man, he's been focusing on the left guard spot, playing next to Andrew Thomas and John Michael Schmitz for what now? 10 weeks plus since he signed with the New York Giants, all throughout minicamp, all throughout OTAs. And then Evan Neal ends up on what? The PUP, physically unable to perform list with that ankle injury. All right. Is it going to be Josh Azudu? Is it going to be Matt Nelson? No. Right away, they say, Jermaine Eluemunor, you're going to play right tackle. And that makes sense to a lot of us because Jermaine Eluemunor has a lot of experience playing right tackle with Carmen Brasillo as his offensive line coach. And we always thought he could be the right tackle if Evan Neal didn't work out or if Evan Neal was injured. But due to those previous comments, it did make me think, how serious is this Evan Neal injury? Because Joe Shane, he's alluded in the opening press conference, practice 1, to the fact that it's not super serious and Evan Neal should be back. He didn't give a timetable, but he said it's nothing too concerning. I think is something to that degree, he said, right, Dan?
Yep.
So I look at this and I'm like, well, then why are we taking Jermaine Eluemunor out of the spot that he's been preparing for mentally and moving him to right tackle if Evan Neal isn't all that injured, right? And even though I might agree with the move of putting Jermaine Eluemunor at right tackle, given the fact that Evan Neal is injured and Evan Neal has been ineffective as a professional, it does seem to be jumbling the offensive line a little bit early on. So I just kind of wanted to get your take on this entire situation and what we should expect. I love the fact that we have Aaron Stinney, somebody we haven't talked that much about, because Aaron Stinney was the player who slid into the left guard spot to allow Jermaine Eluemunor to kick out to right tackle. We talked a lot about John Runyon, and we've talked a lot about Jermaine Eluemunor, but Aaron Stinney, who was competent enough, he was an adequate guard for the Buccaneers last year, he might factor into this if Evan Neal can't get healthy.
Yeah, and I think, look, there hasn't been a lot of discussion on this yet. Maybe I should have done a better job of this yesterday or more of Giants Twitter should have, but it is interesting. Like, if they were so sold on Evan Neal's injury being insignificant and him being ready very soon, would they even make this move? Or would they just say, we got a couple days of it. Let's put Josh Azudu out there. So let's consider the other context here. The other context here is day 1 of training camp practice. That's yesterday, Wednesday. Evan Neal's on the side running. Only thing I heard from beat reporter is it looks like he's running all right on the side. Day 2, today, Thursday, he's nowhere to be found. I don't know why. Is that because there's a setback after the run, tried running? We don't know. We're not going to get that information from Shane or Dable. They're not willing to reveal that information. It serves them no purpose to tell the media that. So we just have to kind of hold our breath again and hope that he's okay and that he'll be back running on the side or whatever it may be, essentially preparing himself to practice again. Because you obviously have to start by running and stop and starting and doing all of those things. If you can't even move the way you want to move, you're not going to be able to practice. So we know that. 2, we know the Giants brought in for a visit yesterday free agent offensive guard Greg Van Run. And he, by the way, is that how you say his name?
Van Roten.
Van Roten. Okay.
You kind of just like skipped over that third word right there.
Yeah, I did it quick. Greg Van Roten, who was, by the way, in the same system. So that would give him a leg up. He's coming from the Carmen. And by the way, according to Pro Football Focus, like a phenomenal player last year. He was like the 8th best guard, I think, or 6th best guard according to their ratings, Pro Football Focus. Now, who knows if he would be that again, but he would be coming in the same system. So I think maybe that would have a factor in, what we've seen so far. Sorry, I got thrown off a little bit by Nick's double eye blink when he heard the word coming.
Dude, chill, man.
But look, I think that there's interesting context at play here with regards to Evan Neal. It's something to track. It's a situation to look at. But I'll say this, man, if it does take Neal a while, and we're like, it's week 2 of training camp. He's still on the side with trainers. Week 3, he's starting to get ready, but he's still not ready. We're going to get to a point where there's going to be 2 or 3 straight weeks of practices with Eluemunor at right tackle. And we may not get to the point where the Giants want to turn back because we may get to a point where they're like, look, these guys have the continuity. They've been working together. We don't want to mess with it. Stinney will be at guard and Eluemunor will be at right tackle. And Neal's just going to have to kind of play with the second team. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it's something to now consider based on the fact that Neal's not practicing and Eluemunor is playing right tackle at this time.
I'm mildly concerned, right? And we're talking, and this is how, just down the New York Giants are. We're talking about a player who hasn't really done anything for the New York Giants, a player who has been a net negative for the New York Giants offense. Now, he spent a lot of his career injured, but I still want to see some return on investment with the 7th overall pick, Dan. And I think that's why a lot of Giant fans are upset. Because I have people on Twitter kind of coming at me a little bit like, he hasn't done. Like, yes, I'm aware Evan Neal has been a disappointment. I get it. But I still believe that he can give the Giants something that at least justifies him being a starting offensive tackle in the league. That's the hope if he's healthy enough. I'm not saying it's going to happen. There's nothing in his professional career that suggests he will, but there's a lot in his college career that does. There's a lot in Joe Schoen's opinion when Joe Schoen selected him. And I appreciated his college film as well. It just hasn't materialized yet in the NFL, but I want him to at least have a healthy chance. And right now, early in training camp, he's not receiving that. And he might not receive that. And now that you have options, you might want to go in another direction. And where does that leave Evan Neal? Just a flat out bust? Do you put him back at right tackle if Jermaine Eluemunor is working out as he did last year with Carmen Brasillo and the Raiders? And if that's all the case, I hope the Giants do sign Van Roten. I do. Van Roten played over 1,000 snaps at right guard with Carmen Brasillo and Jermaine Eluemunor in Las Vegas last year. Yes, he's old, but he could be that swing interior offensive lineman for Aaron Stinney, since he has, I think, like 1,700 snaps at left guard throughout his career, or John Runyon if either of them get hurt. And it just gives you more options, too, at tackle if you want to just leave Josh Ezeudu as that backup tackle. Because when Josh Ezeudu came in, and I know it's training camp practice day one, after Jermaine Eluemunor got hurt yesterday, Josh Ezeudu came in, promptly gave up a sack to Kayvon Thibodeau.
Yeah,
immediately. So it's just
can't play tackle. He's not going to. I don't know why they're playing him there. If an NFL game comes, we're going to be screwed if that dude is at tackle. I hate to say it. He's a nice dude, but we knew he had issues getting into his stance at guard. Imagine at tackle, trying to get into that vertical set over and over and over again. It's not something I want to see working in progress in real season games. You want to work on it in camp and tell me he made a big jump? Fine, I'll buy that for a second. I want to see it in gameplay. But if it starts off bad in gameplay, I don't want him at tackle. But the key here is Evan Neal. Because I'll say this, Nick, everyone could look at his NFL career and be like, why the hell do you guys care about this right now? He is terrible. He's been a bust. He's been horrible. What are you guys even talking about? And to be fair to those people, Nick, if he was a 5th round pick, we'd be saying right now, what are we talking about? Evan Neal should not get the job. He should not even have a chance at the job. Good. He's gone. Put in Eluemunor. That's what it's supposed to be. He's a backup for us. But that's not the reality. The reality is he wasn't a 5th round pick. And he wasn't a 5th round pick for a multitude of reasons. It's not just the film you referenced at Alabama. It's also the fact that he's 6'7", 330. That gives him an advantage over a Jermaine Eluemunor, over a Josh Ezeudu, over everyone in the NFL, essentially, except for 5% of the people. Because when you're that size, it gives you the ability to do some things that we have seen on film. We have seen it on tape, Nick. We've seen him work double teams with Andrew Thomas when they line him up on the same side and destroy people in the run game. We've seen some great blocks from him. There was a screen I remember from a year or two ago where he got out, got on the move, and delivered a great block on a screen because he can move and then deliver blocks. We've seen it at Alabama. We've seen the Giants. It's not just like, this is what I hate about people when they talk about players' NFL film. This happens with Daniel Jones and the pass rush. This happens with Evan Neal too. They act like if something is happening a majority of the time, even if it's the vast majority, that means it's happening every single play. Has Evan Neal been bad a majority of the time? Yes. Has it happened a lot? But maybe I'll even say a vast majority of the time. Yes. But that doesn't mean there haven't been any reps out of the hundreds he's had. Same thing goes for Jones. It's not like Jones hasn't had every single rep at Jones's 2023 was a jailbreak blitz. He had no time whatsoever. He's just back there and there's no chance. It's the same thing with Neal. Not every single block has been blown. Not every assignment's been blown. And in the run game specifically, he's had some really great moments, I think, Evan Neal. So that's just not the ceiling for Jermaine Eluemunor is not the same as the ceiling for Neal. I think it's very important to note that. And it's not just because of his Bama tape. It's because of some of the moments we've seen in the run game already and because of his size and ability based on his size to move people at the NFL level. Also, to get around into his vertical set if he can get it down and block. We've seen it with, again, all Orlando Brown Jr., some of these guys that are not the most athletic players and not the best benders and movers like Neal obviously is not, they still have been able to win. Same thing goes for the dude on the Browns, DeJuan Jones. Now, I agree with what people have said, Nick, that those guys, to be quite honest, do look like they're a little bit more fluid than Evan Neal has looked. But point being, there's a ceiling for him and there's a ceiling for Eluemunor. So I just want to make it clear that I still think he should get a shot to win this job.
Yeah, absolutely. He's only 23 years old, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a 23-year-old kid, and he'll be 24 in September, but he's still a very, very young player. And I think we spent a lot of time on this. I do believe it's important, and I'm hoping that, yes, I am hoping, I'll say that, even though with this prior conversation, and I think this is consistent with that, everything we've said over the last 10 minutes, this injury is not serious because why, like we said earlier, man, why would Joe Schoen and Brian Dable make this drastic of a move if it wasn't serious? So how long is Evan Neal going to be out?
Yeah, it's a recovery. We don't know. Obviously, it ended up being a more serious surgery than they thought. They thought it was an ankle sprain. It ended up being something that required off-season surgery. from what we've heard, but we're not doctors. We don't know.
The flip side of the argument, which I also believe has merit, is look, we can't rely on Evan Neal. So just put Jermaine Eluemunor there, and Jermaine Eluemunor, we trust him enough. He is competent enough to hold down each position, whichever we ask him to do, and he can transition to whichever position we ask him to transition to relatively effortlessly. And honestly, there's merit to that too.
Yeah, just funny because we're talking about a guy who, wasn't like the same prospect or anywhere close to what Evan Neal was. And we're like, we can rely on him anywhere. Just throw him in right tackle one day, left guard the other. It doesn't matter if he's practicing continuity. He'll do the job. And that should be the case with Neal too. I don't think it's over that that's the case just yet. I will say this, though. We mentioned before what would happen to Neal if it does take him a while to recover and Eluemunor is there day in our practice at right tackle. It's possible to me that Neal could get a shot to move back to guard because it's not like he's never done it. He did it at Alabama. It's a possibility. And I'll say this, like, the idea to me, let's say it does go in that direction. I don't hate the idea of an Andrew Thomas left tackle and an Evan Neal left guard, to be completely honest. That's a lot of freaking size, dude, on the left side of your line for the run game. That is to me, feels like if you can get that thing down, and we've seen it. I just mentioned this earlier, Nick. We've seen some of those reps where they stack the side of the line of scrimmage with Thomas and Neal back to back. And those dudes move people in the run game together. And if they start to get some reps right next to each other over and over and over again, to me, that's where I go. If Neal doesn't work out at right tackle and they put Eluemunor there, I want him at left guard, not right guard. I want him at left guard next to Andrew Thomas to really work that double team in the run game.
It's a lot of beef. He played 723 snaps at left guard his freshman year at Alabama. So again, it's something that he has done, and he did it at a pretty solid rate back at Alabama as a 5-star recruit.
He was so good in the SEC. What the hell happened to this guy?
Yeah, no, we'll have to see. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Daniel Jones now. Yeah. Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll stated that Daniel Jones are going to take his progress through practice day by day to see how he's doing. But this is 2 practices in a row where he practiced with team periods. Going back to that, Jermaine Eluemunor returned to practice on the second day of practice, but did not operate in team periods. He was in IDDs, individual drills. But back to Daniel Jones, a question was asked to Joe Schoen about the mindset on the trade up during the pre-training camp press conference. And Joe Schoen said, these are professional athletes. I think this extra motivation or quotes or bulletin board material, I'm not necessarily buying into all of that. And he went on to basically say that Daniel Jones has everything that it takes to be a professional, and he understands competition and competitive atmosphere, and he's self-motivated, and he's turning off all of that noise. But when Daniel Jones was asked, he said, obviously you're not excited about it, but they have a job to do. I got a job to do. So it is what it is. And we're at this point now. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have and excited to play football is what Daniel Jones ended up saying. And I just kind of wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think Daniel Jones is, turning all this off? Because with Hard Knocks, it's really kind of driving the nail into the board, right? Like this isn't just, they try to trade up and now we all kind of forgot about it because that was way back in the end of April.
Right.
Like Hard Knocks is kind of bringing these feelings back up. So I'm hoping our quarterback is so dialed into football and all that outside noise is actually out. But this is Joe Schoen's attempt to bury this narrative that has been rekindled due to Hard Knocks.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'll start by saying this. I am a big proponent of, this for the fact, because I've talked about this on the pod a bunch of times. I hate the idea of, we got our starting quarterback. Don't you dare bring in good competition. It's going to scare him, and then it's going to make him feel like he's not our guy. No. Competition should breed the best out of people. And if you're actually a great player that you can win, that a team can win with long-term, then it doesn't matter who you bring behind him because you'll beat that guy out, and you should want to beat that guy out. So, and I think Daniel Jones is wired that way. So I do agree with Joe Schoen actually here in saying, I don't really believe Daniel Jones is going to worry about this bulletin board material, have it be on his mind, feel like he's getting second guessed at all. I think that's the good part of Jones, his work ethic, how hard he works, how he tunes all this stuff out, how good he is with the media, all things of that nature. His competitive drive, even as we've seen throughout the games, he's running into contact, taking hits for his team, doing all things like that, right? I think all of that stuff's great with Daniel Jones. I also think there's a little bit of think about 2022, right? Where the Giants just said to Jones flat out, we're not picking up your 5th-year option. Nobody does that, right? They're just like, nope, we're not picking this thing up. And he went out and had his best season by far of his career. It was the only season where Daniel Jones wasn't in the bottom 20, the bottom 10 or bottom 5 in EPA. He was top 10. And he's never even sniffed top 15 or top 20 before that or since that. So it brought out the best in him in 2022. Can it bring out the best in him again in 2024? Maybe that's kind of what Shane's hoping for and kind of driving at a little bit here. And Daniel Jones said it. He's like, look, I don't want, you never want to hear that. And we didn't really get to hear it, by the way, Nick. That's another thing somebody brought up to me. It was interesting. In Hard Knocks, Joe Shane recounted his conversation with Daniel Jones. It was an overlay recounting it. We didn't see, it would have been cool to see the actual conversation that Joe Shane had with Daniel Jones. There's probably a reason Giants that we didn't see that. And it's probably a conversation that was a little harsher than what we got, right? We got the after from Jones. We got the after from Shane. I'm sure Jones wasn't thrilled about it, and he probably had some concerns that he voiced about it. I'm sure the same thing happened with Shane. He's like, look, you got to do this and this better, because that's the next part of this, Nick, right? Like Joe Shane said, and this was very forthcoming. And I think, again, part of this is just the idea that now that this Hard Knocks is out there and people are seeing it, Joe Shane, in my mind at least, Nick, feels like he can be a little bit more blunt and a little bit more real with what he's telling the media. That's my evaluation of it, at least, because he also said, he also said to a question where, I believe it was Duggan, or I'm not sure who asked it, so I apologize for that, about, does Jones need to play better than he did in 2023? Because, outside of the injury and outside of just the offensive line play, he didn't have a good season. And there are moments that, this is completely true. You could just see pockets that he's bailing from that he shouldn't have. He felt it looked way less comfortable in the pocket on tape. Part of that's probably O-line. The pick six against the Seahawks was terrible. Really, the entire 49ers game was bad. Like, there were moments that were just really bad. And Joe Shane said, yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. We need better from Daniel Jones 2024. That was a lot, man. Like, I didn't expect to hear him say that at all. And I think that kind of goes into the thing we were talking about just now, Nick, where it's like he's kind of trying to drive this momentum of, look, back against the wall, chips on the push all your chips in Daniel Jones. Everyone's doubting you. Show us what you did in 2022 when last time everyone doubted you.
I like that take a lot. And that's probably what is happening in Joe Shane's mind. It's like, dude, we didn't pick up your fifth-year option, homie. And then you came out and you led us to a playoff victory. Now, there were a lot of reasons for that, but Daniel Jones was a big reason for that as well, even though there are some negative statistics that would contradict that. But still, man, he was a freaking starting quarterback. So hopefully he can do the same thing now. And look, we're in the NFC. We've talked a lot about it, Dan. There are games to be won here for the New York Giants. I think the range of outcomes for this team, it's vast, man. I could see them winning 3 games. I could see them winning 9, man. Like, it really just depends on how the ball bounces. And hopefully you're not going to have a worse start than the 2023 season, because getting blown out 40-0 by the Dallas Cowboys in the manner that they did and losing their star left tackle certainly, I think, had a deleterious effect on the New York Giants season as a whole.
Deleterious. That's a Nick Filato word right there. And look, if the Giants can I know we were dead last in explosive pass plays. Like you said, I think the craziest stat was the one you said about his throws outside the numbers, completion outside the numbers in 2022. But even with that, dude, if they could get just what he gave them in 2022, with the improvements they've made to the rest of the roster, the defensive line, adding Nabers to the mix, I think they would be a 10-11 win team that could maybe win a playoff game or two. So I think that would be enough. Like, just get back to what he did in 2022. So maybe that's all Shane wants by saying all this, right? Let's get him motivated to be back to that level of quarterback. We have to at least get that out of him. That's the minimum. To have any chance to win any games this year, the minimum is what he gave them in 2022, which again was only 15 passing touchdowns, dead last in explosive pass plays, no throws outside the numbers, but it's enough to win. Like, you'll run a little, you'll do some bootleg stuff, and you'll just move the football, because he did create first downs, Daniel Jones, in 2022. That's evidenced by his EPA. He had a really high EPA in 2022, which is important. That's expected points added each play. But the one other thing I want to touch on with what Shane said before we move on to practices is, finally, for the first time, and I couldn't believe it took this long, but a beat reporter did ask Joe Shane about the Daniel Jones injury guarantee for 2025. And we've discussed it on this podcast, but if you're new to the pod, Daniel Jones, his agent, did a masterful job working on his contract, really just locked things up from a guaranteed money standpoint, from a average per year, but also added one little nugget in there, one little Easter egg that's very important. He gave Daniel Jones, despite the fact that when he signed, he already had neck injury. He didn't have the ACL, but he basically was injured every year except for 2022. He got him an injury guarantee in his contract, which is crazy, but it's true. And the injury guarantee is, if Daniel Jones gets injured again this year, and it's a season-ending injury, he's had 2 season-ending injuries already in his career. If he gets his 3rd this year, and he cannot pass his physical by this coming March, the new league year, the Giants are on the hook for another $23 million in dead salary cap. That would be on top of the already dead salary cap that's in his contract. It would bring the number close to, I believe, between 46 and $50 million against cap. So if Daniel Jones has another torn ACL or a neck injury that he can't play football again, the Giants are going to have 46 million in dead cap allocated to him next year, even if he can't play the quarterback position, which is obviously means you can't win in the NFL when you have that. Like, you're just kind of screwed. So finally, someone asked him about this, like, is this going to factor into your decision making? And I thought Joe Schoen's answer was very interesting. He didn't say flat out, no, we're not even going to care about this. Doesn't matter. He said, it's a decision for down the line. We're taking this thing with Daniel Jones day by day, which I thought was really interesting, man, because I just didn't expect him to even address this whatsoever. But I think all this is coming out now because of Hard Knocks. And he's the way that we're finally hearing truth and interesting comments from the GM, because he's like, F it. We're giving away all this information on Hard Knocks anyway.
What else are you going to say? I think every time coaches say, "Oh, we're taking it day by day," blah, 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 when they give you that spiel, it basically means shut the fuck up. I don't want to hear your questions here. This is a very tough question. And yes, they may be taking it day by day, but obviously that has to factor into the decision making. But you don't want to also throw your quarterback under the bus and be like, by the way, Daniel Jones, you might get benched if you suck early on, because you might be on the hook for all this money, because this is the contract that our general manager, our front office, the New York Giants, gave you. And this is what you have constructed. And geez, whoever the agent was, good on them, dude. Like, that was absolutely
phenomenal contract by that agent. Really did a great job. Difference between that agent and the Barkley agent, right? No, I'm kidding. The Barkley agent eventually I think he hired a different agent this offseason, but he or she, I don't remember what it was, eventually got.
Ed Berry is his current agent.
Okay. Yeah. Ed Berry eventually got, a very nice deal for him with Philly. But let's get some notes from practice, Nick. I thought it was interesting just to touch on some of the Joe Schoen stuff first. And again, we do spend a lot of time on Evan Neal and Daniel Jones, but that's because those are the two most important players that if the Giants are going to be good this year. Those two and Nabers are basically the difference between if they'll be good or not this year. So time must be spent on those three players. But some interesting start. Some PUP list players. We talked about Evan Neal. Aaron Robinson still on the PUP list, man. Just a very sad story. I feel bad for the guy. I remember when he did get that injury in 2022, Nick, everybody said that I listened to, like the sports doctors, like, this is not just a torn ACL. This was a really, really bad one. So I am at the point with Aaron Robinson, Nick, where I would be surprised if he ever plays again in the NFL. Just to not, I'm hoping I'm wrong about that. But sometimes when you get these really bad injuries, you're just never the same player you were from a physical standpoint, from an athleticism standpoint. I would, if I had to guess, I think that's what might be happening with him. But I hope I'm wrong, and I hope he could turn this thing around. It's been a really long time since he's played football.
Yeah, it's really sad too. I mean, third round pick, promising, could play slot. He had a lot of different options coming in. He would have been
and he was starting to play good too toward the end, right?
Yeah, he was solid. I would say he was solid in his rookie season too. Like, I think some people were underwhelmed, but what do you expect? He's a third round cornerback. Cornerback is such a hard position to play. And he had a pretty unique role too when he was in college. So, and remember, this is a kid who went to Alabama initially, and then he ended up going to UCF. And now we'll have to wait and see. I would love to see him out there, but of course, it's difficult. Theo Johnson also on. What were you going to say? Sorry, buddy.
I was going to say, you talked about it. It's a good point. He showed more promise really to us before the injury than we ever got from Cordell Flott, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, Darnay Holmes, at least in coverage.
It's an excellent point. That's an excellent point.
It's so sad. It's just unlucky. That injury was just very unlucky.
I'm so glad you brought that up though, too, because that's a way to really judge him, because he has only really 1 year under his belt. And if you, juxtapose or compare and contrast him with Cordell Flott, I was much more excited about Aaron Robinson heading into his second season than I am about Cordell Flott right now. Hopefully that changes.
Yeah. And then the other one, Theo Johnson, we need to see him come off that pup soon. I hope he does. I heard he was running.
Joe Schoen said nothing to be worried about.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to see how fast he can move up the depth chart, because obviously there is potential for it, given his size, given his frame, given the tape we've seen, given how they didn't use him at Penn State, how he should have been used, given the potential blocking upside. There's a chance he can move up that depth chart to tight end too, but he needs to get on the field to do it.
Yeah, him and Jalen Mills, Joe Schoen, and also the other player, Stanley Thomas Oliver, who has a groin injury. I think Joe Schoen was basically, it's not that big of a deal. We're just, we'll wait and see, but they shouldn't be out too long. That's kind of what he alluded to.
I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to enter a parallel universe or go through some elaborate labyrinth just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out, It really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. It's easy to switch to. The website has a good interface. I have a couple buddies who have recommended this to me. They speak highly of Mint Mobile. Get started. Go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That is 3 Bs. There you'll see that right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. Plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That's mintmobile.com/BBB. 3 Bs, triple B. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/BBB. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE System.
And you touched on this earlier, Nick, but offensive line combination without Evan Neal in the field was Thomas, and you touched on this, Aaron Stinney getting a shot at left guard, JMS, Runyon, and Eluemunor. And then second team was Azudu, who then had to at left tackle, but he had to kick out to right tackle after the injury to Eluemunor. And then Jake Kubis at left guard, Austin Schlottman at center, Jimmy Morrissey at right guard and Joshua Mills at right tackle. It's not really a second team offensive line to write home about, I would say. And from what I've heard from people who are at practice, shout out Bobby Skinner, it's been really, really ugly so far with the second team offensive line. So it just is what it is. We've added depth, Nick, but that depth is contingent on us having Evan Neal and Jermaine Eluemunor playing. When you lose two of the guys, well, now it starts to eat into your depth a little bit.
One of the many reasons why I want them to sign Greg Van Roten, who's like in his early 30s or mid 30s, and when you're really just like hitching your wagon to that, it's not always a great situation, Dan.
No, it's not necessarily, but it is what it is. That's where we're at. Okay. Let's see what else we can touch on here. You touched a bit on the Kayvon Thibodeau play against Josh Azudu when he came in. And let's see, we're just going to kind of recap both practices so we can get into some of the fun stuff if you want from
we could do that. And I also want to talk a little bit about just how the Giants are handling certain rotations early in camp. Okay. Specifically at the nickel cornerback spot. We're seeing a lot of Isaiah Simmons out there. We're seeing a lot of Nick McLeod out there. We know Andrew Phillips is going to be in that situation as well as Darnay Holmes. So it looks like they're going to rotate the nickel spot and also some of the safeties, because I think in the first practice it was Jason Pinnock and Dane Belton who ended up starting. I'm sure Tyler Nubin will work into there. When Jalen Mills comes up back off the injured list, he's going to focus into that. So it looks like the Giants aren't necessarily set on who their secondary starting pieces are going to be. They're going to rotate these guys. They're going to rotate the defensive line. I believe it was Nacho and Ryder Anderson who started with Dexter Lawrence on day one. I'm imagining some of those other players will factor into it. Elijah Chapman, the undrafted kid out of SMU, who is like 6 foot, 285 pounds, has that upfield burst you and I have been talking about, that upfield burst that we want from a 3 technique, has some solid tape from SMU. He was making some plays. Boogie Basham had an interception off a deflected pass as well. I think it might have been deflected by Ryder Anderson. I'm not 100% sure about that, or Jordan Phillips, but it just seems like there are a lot of position battles on the defensive side of the football. And the only groups that are really kind of like solidified are edge and linebacker.
Yeah, it's going to be a battle, it's going to be a battle of a lot of these positions, which is interesting. We knew going in, Nick, I feel like that the secondary was still a little bit uncertain as far as who's going to play. We added bodies there. I think having Isaiah Simmons in the mix at nickel is really interesting. I saw a rep of him in pass coverage against, I'm forgetting who it was, where he lost initially.
Isaiah McKenzie.
It was against McKenzie, yeah, the old Bill. He lost, and that's a tough matchup for him, right? They were talking about like a true slot player against a safety linebacker, and he lost initially, but I thought you did a good job of illustrating this. With his length and his arm length, he was able to recover, and that's something that's interesting because he talked about it. He said a day or two ago that he's really excited about his new role in this defense. We went into last year thinking, just based on not really knowing much, having seen it, okay, maybe Isaiah Simmons could be a sweet fit for Wink Martindale, and he'll get to blitz off the edge, but he kind of said, like, look, I'm going back to a role that I played in my final season with Arizona where I felt I was playing my best football. And at least considering production, he's right. He had 90 tackles his last year, 2 interceptions, bunch of forced fumbles, a couple sacks in there, was really an impact player in a lot of ways for Arizona by playing more of a defensive back role. So I am actually now turning back on whatever we said about his role in Wink's defense and being like, you know what, maybe I should have been excited about how he'll fit in Shane Bowen's defense, because again, I always come back to this. It's a lot more similar to how he played in that Venables defense at Clemson, and that was where he really had great tape.
We're gonna see nickel blitzes too. You know, it could be only a 4-man, but just send the defensive back, drop another play like a simulated blitz, right? Where it's going to be Isaiah Simmons and Brian Burns coming from the same side. And then like Kayvon Thibodeau dropping off into coverage off the other side. So you still have 7 guys in coverage, 4 guys rushing. And if they don't have protection slid to the Brian Burns, the offense that is, don't have protection slid to the Brian Burns, Isaiah Simmons side, that's going to be a lot for that offense to handle. And it should be interesting in 3rd and 6+ situations.
If you slide it there, you got Kayvon Thibodeau on a one-on-one. Or Dexter Lawrence.
Kayvon in this situation would be dropping off, unless it's Dex and Kayvon rushing, and then Aziz is the guy dropping, depending on the personnel that's out there, of course.
Speaking of Aziz, I feel like he's had a pretty good start to his training camp. Healthy, first of all, he hasn't been injured yet, and I think he got a sack or two. A sack today's practice, what would be sack. They obviously don't hit. That's interesting. Some schematic note I wanted to bring up, Nick. Basically all too high so far in training camp from Shane Bowen's defense. And I think that's going to be a big change for Giants fans. We're going to watch a lot. The schematics of the defenses are about to change night and day going from Wink to Shane.
I know, and it's gonna be interesting to see how the run defense holds up.
I
Shane
know.
Bowen mentioned it. I think it was on Hard Knocks episode 1, where there's a lot of pressure. There's a burden on the linebacker position. So Bobby Okereke, man, he might be one of the most important players on the New York Giants. I mean, Giant fans kind of already acknowledged this after we saw him play last year. Yes, the defense, statistically, it doesn't really reflect, I feel like, the improvement of the Giants linebacker position from 2022 to 2023. But Micah McFadden and Bobby Okereke, there's going to be a lot on those guys' plates. I'm just so damn hopeful that they're hungry, man.
And not just on those guys' plates, Nick. There's another battle that's emerging that you were talking about. We've got a lot of battles already on the defense side, at least on the defense side of the ball. We'll talk about one on the offense side of the ball too that I want to get to at the wide receiver position. But there's another battle on the defensive side of the ball that's starting to emerge, and it's linebacker Deontay Johnson, who's been getting first-team reps. He's not starting right now. Micah McFadden's still going out ahead of him, but Deontay Johnson's playing first-team reps already and making plays in practice. And it's a brand new defense with Shane Bowen. Like we've talked about, Micah McFadden was not a guy he drafted for his system. Micah McFadden seemed to fit the wing system. We still don't kind of know if he's going to fit this Shane Bowen system. And Deontay Johnson's making plays in practice and starting to get first-team reps. That's one that I think is really interesting, is going to start to emerge as a big battle here for that second linebacker spot.
He's a little bit of a bigger linebacker, right? Like he's like 6'2", 230 pounds. Obviously, Deontay Johnson is not Rashawn Evans, but remember, they drafted Rashawn Evans in 2018. He ended up playing some years with Shane Bowen, and Shane Bowen was also on the roster for Tennessee Titans at that time. So maybe they are in the arena for a bigger type of linebacker. 6'2", 230. I mean, Micah McFadden isn't that, but Deontay Johnson is a player that I feel like kind of has a little bit more oomph to him, right?
Yep.
A little bit more power to him. At least that's what it seemed like when I watched.
More length too.
Game. Yeah, I'm sure he has more length. I mean, that's one of Micah McFadden's biggest issues. He has short arms and he misses a lot of tackles. So we're not saying Deontay Johnson is in a pure battle with Micah McFadden, but if Johnson keeps impressing through camp, he could earn some snaps and a roster spot, which what does that say about Darius Muasau if Darius Muasau gets bumped? So there's a lot of moving parts. It's early in camp, but it's interesting enough that he is earning first reps this early on in training camp.
Completely agree with you. And I think that's a battle to look at. Speaking of other battle to look at, and we'll get to this side of the ball. We can circle back to defense after this, but it's that wide receiver spot, because we've seen already that Jalen Hyatt's getting reps over Darius Slayton so far in camp. We don't know, if that's just early in camp. We don't know if I doubt it's going to be a thing where it's just like Slayton's now just not playing and Hyatt's getting all these snaps. I think they'll still have somewhat of a rotation, but it could be leaning one way or the other. Both have looked good so far in camp. Darius Slayton had he had a route against, I think, Cordell Flott. Just a sick release off the line of scrimmage.
Oh, dude.
Filthy. And this dude works his ass off. I posted that route, and then his wide receiver coach sent me like 4 videos of him working on this release in the offseason. Remember last offseason, he worked so hard on becoming a hands catcher, Darius Slayton. And we saw moments of that progress, that training in the offseason, translating to games, because he made some catches with his hands that he didn't make prior in his career. And now if he can really hone in that progress he's made, plus the release off the line of scrimmage, again, just 27 years old, he should be on the field. So should Jalen Hyatt, though. Jalen Hyatt had a long touchdown catch in practice. He had another that should have been a touchdown, or he had a red zone drill touchdown where the ball was a little late. But, Jalen Hyatt looks good too. And he's obviously, worked on his strength. But I'm just excited about these guys, dude, because I agree with what Mike Kafka's evaluation is, that he was fine with those 3 receivers. And I'm the same way. I'm happy we have Nabers, but I think they're all very, very underrated. And they're underrated because they don't have production and stats. And that's what people look for. How many sacks does a guy have? How many yards does he have receiving? How many touchdowns? When they don't really realize the context is you can't catch the football and turn them into touchdowns and yards unless the quarterback and the O-line are doing their jobs. And they haven't been for the Giants for a long time. So I'm just excited about those 2.
The red zone Poco post corner route that he ran was just sick. I think it was against Trey Hawkins III. Trey Hawkins III, man, it seems like he's losing a lot of these reps, even in team and in individual one-on-one period. It's tough for defensive backs, so we always got to keep
especially
that in
those
mind.
Bigger dudes that are like kind of not really that flute,
he's not he always oversets on the jab foot. It seems like Jalen Hyatt, though, that was just a sick route. Like, I wonder if that was Deontay Banks, if Deontay Banks would have been toasted.
Yeah.
It was that impressive. But there was one cornerback, just to flip it back to the defensive side before we go back to the wide receivers, who, holy crap, man. And I know there were only a couple plays that were circulating. He might have lost other ones that we didn't get the benefit of seeing. but Wan'Dale Robinson versus Nick McCloud, and Nick McCloud in the slot. Wan'Dale Robinson was getting frustrated because Nick McCloud was physical. He was staying square, insanely disciplined, good timing through the catch point to knock the pass down on that one little quick in route. And then there was the other one where Nick McCloud tied Wan'Dale Robinson up for like 2.5 seconds. Like the play probably would have been over. And then Daniel Jones threw a beautiful pass with touch. I believe it was Jones over the top, and Wan'Dale ends up catching it. But in the NFL, that play is probably dead because Daniel Jones will look at Wan'Dale and be like, Wan'Dale, you are doing nothing for me right now. I need to get through my progression and get to someone else because you're just locked up by Nick McCloud. So holy crap, is Nick McCloud impressing early in camp?
It's music to my ears, Nick, because I love when the players that we talk about seeing show up on tape, like Nick McCloud, day after day. We've been talking about Nick McCloud for 2 years now, multiple game films that we broke down where he stood out and nobody talked about it. Nobody knew about it. Nobody says a word because you have to be watching the tape to see it. And then it shows up. And this guy is such a steady drumbeat, man. I don't know why he didn't play a lot under Wink Martindale, but I think that might change right away under Shane Bowen because he's got a fresh slate now, new coaching staff, and they're going to see what we saw, which is in practice, he's really impressive. When he gets to the games, he's really impressive. We're not talking about an all-star level corner or anything. I'm not talking about he's going to be an elite guy or has the trajectory of a Deonte Banks. But can he be a solid starter and somebody you can rely on, which you can't necessarily say about Cordell Flott or Drew Phillips or some of these other guys? That, to me, could be yes. And if that's yes, that's big for the Giants because they need a reliable cornerback too. I don't care where he plays, the slot or the outside. They need a second defensive back they can rely on in coverage in the regular season. And I think McCloud could be that guy.
I hope so. And as for Darnay Holmes, I mentioned him before. He's been earning second team reps on the outside. So I believe the starting corners have been Cordell Flott, Deonte Banks Flott. I think that position could be grabbed if any of the other outside cornerbacks end up rising their level of play. And it's been Darnay Holmes and Trey Hawkins III on the second unit.
Yeah. And so we'll have to see how it all plays out. But again, I'm excited for the steady drumbeat for Nick McCloud here. Let's get to a player we haven't talked about a lot, despite him having an electric second practice. It's Malik Nabers, the Giants' first-round draft pick. I know he had a drop yesterday that he should have caught.
He had one today, too.
And he had one today. So
don't care.
2 drops. I don't care. I mean, there's some drops on film. Drops are the least thing I'm worried about with the receivers. I want you to make plays for me. Drops get very overrated. But the plays he did make were electric. Some of the route he ran against Deonte Banks, the comeback in the end zone, electric. His touchdown in red zone drills, that was a filthy route. I mean, the DB had no chance to cover him on that, in my mind, just based on his athleticism. But then he adjusted in air and caught a ball that was behind him like that. And that doesn't mean necessarily it's a bad throw, by the way. We have to see the full view to know if there's a linebacker in that passing lane, you can only throw the ball behind the receiver. So anyone who saw it and said it was a bad throw, you should. I agree with the other people who say, look, you got to see that full view. I'm just commenting on the play by Nabers, the adjustment in air to a ball that's behind him. Not to say it was a bad throw, just the ability to adjust, catch that in stride while going at full speed and reel it in for the touchdown. Just impressive. He's just very impressive from a physical trait standpoint. It's going to be hard to guard. Even when I saw him on that reverse where he got the ball in the reverse, he looked very explosive once he got the ball in his hands, which we saw, again, all on tape. But it's still good to see against NFL speed defensive backs and NFL speed linebackers on the reverse and things of that nature. So already showing out well in Giants practice. And I just want him and Daniel Jones. I think the back shoulder ball that Jones threw in the red zone drill, Nick, did you see that one? That was one of the best ball Jones threw in either practice. I don't even see
now, that was just one-on-ones too. So it wasn't like there was trash in front of him. I'm not trying to disparage him. I'm just saying it wasn't one-on-ones. But Daniel Jones, he's been, I would say, hit or miss. He's had a couple throws that people are making a huge deal on, like the overthrow screen and things like he's trying to get the timing down. I'm not too much of a stickler with that right now in training camp, but the pinpoint accuracy on that throw to Nabers and some of the other throws that he has had, impressive. And he has thrown the ability, or he has shown the ability to throw with some touch and some trajectory in the red zone and in red zone drills. So I appreciate that about Daniel Jones so far early in camp. And you also got to think that this guy is returning from a serious knee injury. He's about 8 months out from that. So it's good to see him have some pinpoint accuracy, and it's not always consistent, but I've been, from what I've seen, a little bit I have seen, I've been okay with everything I've seen from Daniel Jones.
Yeah, specifically that red zone throw, man, that's as good as it gets because I agree there's no trash in front of him, but just to have that amount, that one looked like it came out hot with good velocity and still had perfect ball placement on the back shoulder. So that's where you want it. And Malik Nabers reeled it in. And
it's also, this is your rookie first round pick, Malik Nabers. Typically, you always hear you need some sort of rapport with the wide receiver to develop a connection where you can hit that back shoulder. And I know this is a one-on-one drill against your top cornerback, but there was a rapport on that play with Daniel Jones and Malik Nabers for sure.
The timing was great, and that's what we want to see. The timing, that timing is going to take time to get down, like you mentioned with that Singletary throw. Though I do think that those throws have always been a struggle for Jones.
I agree.
Those around the line of scrimmage, because you see it on the play. The trajectory just doesn't change, man. It's that over the top throw, and you don't want over the top for that. You want to go 3/4 for that. I feel like, because it's just going to make it a more accurate throw, and maybe it's a little bit rushed too, but it's just so harder to get it accurate over the top. It's that short, but. The other throws, some of them have been great. The throw to Wan'Dale you talked about earlier, I know he had a bunch of time there, but it's still a great ball. He layered it and he put it to the outside shoulder. That's what I want to see more of, more layered outside shoulder throws.
Absolutely. Even the PBU that Nick McLeod had on Wan'Dale Robinson, it was low into the outside of Wan'Dale Robinson. People be like, oh, that's inaccurate. It's like, that's exactly where it needed to be. Based on the leverage of Nick McLeod. Nick McLeod played it so well that he forced Daniel Jones to have a quote unquote bad throw, but it's actually a good throw because it was away from the leverage of the defender.
Correct. And that's the difference. In a lot of NFL games, the difference is ball placement. And that's something that he has flashed at times. Obviously, some has been better than others. We're going to have to give him time. He's just working back from injury. It's impressive enough that he's playing in all these team drills, honestly. All right, outside of Malik Nabers, I feel like we've touched a little bit on Nabers. We touched a little bit on Isaiah Simmons that I wanted to talk about. Deonte Banks has looked pretty good and pretty consistent so far. Have we missed anything else that you've wanted to touch on so far from the first two practices?
We talked a decent amount about Darius Slayton, had a really nice catch along the sidelines. I believe that was in one-on-one period. It might have been team period, but it didn't seem like anybody was really around Daniel Jones. So I just deduced that it was one-on-one. And then there was the release that you mentioned briefly before. That was a beautiful split release where he just comes to balance so well. And he uses excellent timing to break the inside jam, the inside punch from Cordell Flott. And then he stacked, leaned to the outside, stuck, went right back to the inside, left Cordell Flott completely in his tracks. I hope Flott can play that a little bit better in the future. But again, these are one-on-ones. And I think it's just going to be very interesting. I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, but it's going to be very interesting to see how Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka are going to use these wide receivers. And it's a good problem to have. You have one star, then you have a bunch of other role players and a bunch of other, I would say, good number 2 wide receivers. I think Hyatt, Wan'Dale, and Darius Slayton can all be good number 2 wide receivers. They might not have shown it yet in the case of Jalen Hyatt. I know Wan'Dale's a little bit specific, right? But I like the fact that we have that. And then that's not even bringing up like the Isaiah Hodgins of the world, who I believe will make this team and should have some role on this offense. One more thing too is Brian Daboll is prevaricating a little bit when it comes to the play calling, but it seems like for sure that he's going to be the play caller heading into the season.
I would be shocked if he wasn't too, Nick. Would he do this? You're right. He's kind of trying to leave it open-ended, but I think this is it, man. I think he knows like the pressure is on him. He has to win football games this year with what he's got at quarterback and offensive line. And so the best way to do that in his mind, I would think, is let him have control of the reins. Let him call the plays. No offense to Mike Kafka, because I think Mike Kafka did a great job calling plays in 2022, to be honest.
And you know what, Dan, man, like you and I, we've been consistent with this. We typically don't love that. Right? We typically don't love that. But at this point, I think I'm willing to at least try it. But I also know if week 3 rolls around and the offense sucks, we might be saying, singing a different tune. But man, we need something different from the 2023 season. And this is where it gets interesting. And shout out to Justin Pennick for the work he did on this. I love the editing that he did. If Brian Daboll was calling the plays during the 3-game winning streak with Tommy DeVito, I think you have to roll with Brian Daboll at that point, right?
Yeah, sure. But
you were able to take an undrafted kid and win football games against playoff teams?
That's a suggestion. He called the plays during those 3 games.
He never suggested that. I'm positing that as a possible theory,
but then
or a possible hypothesis of what actually happened there. I'm unaware, and I think no one actually truly knows who was calling plays at certain points of the season last year.
Interesting. I agree with you. We'll never know. But then he gave it. It would be weird. Then he gave it back up after a 3-game winning streak. But maybe that did happen. I don't know. Well, point being, I'm with you. The main point is what I'm focusing on. What you said here, which is, look, we put some rings and whistles and bells on it, Nick. But the fact of the matter is, this offense is largely the same because of the quarterback and because of the offensive line. Yes, Nabers is here. Barkley's gone. But the quarterback and the offensive line are the same. So we need to try something different, I think, to get this offense going, because even what they gave them in 2022 is not sustainable. No explosive pass plays, no throws outside the numbers. That's not sustainable against good defense. We played the AFC South that year. We're not playing the AFC South again for another 2 years. So Agreed. If Brian Dable can be the guy that helps it, I think it's possible because, like I said earlier in the offseason, I still think there's a scenario where Brian Dable can make this offense quarterback proof if the offensive line helps them out. And if this offense is quarterback proof, they're going to produce some passing yards for the first time, basically since 2019 on a consistent basis.
Also, the man of the people, Lawrence Cager, has been turning heads
good
in training camp as well. And I think a lot of people are saying that he's working with the second team. We saw him beat Deontay Banks on a slant. He beat somebody else on a deep post as well. He might have a bigger role than we originally anticipated. Chris Manhertz also worked in first team reps at certain points. So you're looking at Chris Manhertz's name, Daniel Bellinger. He's been the first team tight end. Lawrence Cager's name. Haven't heard much about Jack Stoll, but I hope that we do because I want as much competition as possible at this position to get the best 3 or 4 tight ends on this roster.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I'm happy we didn't miss the discussion on Cager because it's clear the Giants like Cager more than most people know or think. Also, it's clear that right now they're a little light on tight end as far as receiving tight ends go outside of Bellinger. They've got a couple blockers behind him. I think Stahl can do a little more. We'll see if that ends up being right. But look, Cager is going to probably have a role on this offense, which leads me to believe it's going to be interesting to see if they're going to keep all of those tight ends, right? Like, there were some, in my opinion, wrought with inconsistent reporting on Daniel Bellinger earlier from OTAs, a lot of overreaction to nonsense. Daniel Bellinger will make this roster, but those predictions of Daniel Bellinger not making the roster can be looked at from a broader standpoint of, will one of these tight ends not make the roster? That I think is very possible. I don't think that tight end, I know that tight end won't be Daniel Bellinger. I'm willing to even make a bet on it if anybody wants to, because I'll be right and I'll take the win off that bet. It's a free win for me, but someone might get cut and it might be Manhertz or it might be Stahl or Cager.
I love how your mind is always on gambling of some sort.
Oh yeah, make a bet with me. I'll take the bet.
I'll take it, man. It's a free bet. Give me that shit right in the veins.
That to me is free money. And you got beat reporters telling you it's going to happen. So you got the guys. Take them. Give me that bet. Give me that bet.
Give me it. Yeah. Now, other than that, though, it looks like the Giants are going to have some explosive weapons, and the focal point will be Malik Nabers. If Lawrence Cager does make the team, he is different than the other tight ends from just the sheer fact that he is a former wide receiver. Tyrone Tracy, Devin Singletary, and Eric Gray they're all kind of splitting reps at this moment. Obviously, Motor, Singletary, as Brian Dable said, he knows the offense well. He's going to have the inside track, but that could easily be a split once the season rolls around. If Tyrone Tracy, who had a nice one-handed catch on a screen pass in the second practice, if he can get on the field, you're looking at weaponry of Tyrone Tracy. He could be unique, right? You're looking at Lawrence Cager. You're looking at Malik Nabers, Jalen Hyatt, Wandale Robinson. It's an exciting 11 personnel package. It might not be proven. That still needs to be actualized, but it's certainly exciting.
I think it's exciting. I think it's more proven than people realize on film. I'm going to keep saying that until it hammers home. I also think wide receiver production is dependent on quarterback play. So I think that an offensive line play. So I think that we're going to need to see all that come together for us to consider them more proven.
It's really just going to be how well does Brian Dable, Mike Kafka, and the Giants staff divvy up the snaps and don't set trends. Because a player like Daniel Bellinger, I hope we see him more as a receiver, right? Lawrence Cager, if they like him so much, are you only going to put him out there on obvious passing downs? Can he be out there for these running downs? So there's going to be a little bit of creativity when it comes to that. But I have faith, or I hope to have faith. I try to have faith that the Giants staff will figure it out.
Me too, Nick. I have that faith as well. So we'll see what happens. Anything else we missed?
No, I think that's good, bro.
All right, that was a recap of the first 2 days of Giants training camp practice and some notes from Joe Shane's presser. A reminder, I'm very excited about this. Nick Filato is going to be at practice tomorrow, Friday, to give his observations of what he sees with his own 2 eyes from there. Doesn't need the videos, just gets to see it. And there's a lot to see. I did training camp practices in the past with the Giants when I was credentialed with 24/7 Sports. There's a lot you see there that you won't see from doing this at home. So I'm excited to get those takes from you. Otherwise, everybody else, great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.